Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Ricky Swanell, aho no Tamaki Makaurau. Aho, my name is Ricky Swanell. I call Auckland home. Yes, Statler and Waldorf, we're back again.
And we hope we have everything right today. Ko hukurangi tōku maunga, ko waiapu, tōku awa, ko nuku taimemihia, tōku waka, ko te whānau atu uruahi, tōku hapu, ko tēnā toka, tōku marae, ko Ngāti Porou, tōku iwi, ko Kirsty, aho. My name is Kirsty Stanway and I call Auckland home as well, but my roots are in the east coast of New Zealand and Tauranga also. Well, let's start then, shall we? We are your joint MCs and we're delighted to welcome you to the Sport New Zealand Women and Girls Summit for 2020, a Sport New Zealand event delivered by Women in Sport Aotearoa and the Shift Foundation. We begin by acknowledging Te Atiawa Taranaki Whānui and Te Whanganui Tara, the Kaitiaki of West Sport New Zealand and the Shift Foundation are located. We also acknowledge the Hokainga in Tamaki Makaurau, that is Auckland of course, and particularly Ngāti Whātua or Ōrākei as Kaitiaki of where Women in Sport Aotearoa is located and where the National Online Conference is running from today.
The annual Sport New Zealand Women and Girls Summit is one of 24 commitments that Sport NZ made when the government Women and Girls in Sport and Active Recreation strategy was launched 2 years ago by the Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Jacinda Ardern, and the Minister for Sport and Recreation, the Honourable Grant Robertson. It's the second of 3 planned events in this series being staged in the run-up to what will be a great event, the 8th IWG World Conference on Women in Sport, being held in Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland, and online 5th to the 8th of May 2022. Thank you to Sport New Zealand for the support and making this event free and learning and networking possible. Yesterday, we kicked things off with a pretty fantastic 3-hour mix of keynotes, panels and workshops dedicated to pillar 1 of that strategy, that's leadership. The summit is dedicated to creating positive action towards equity for women and girls in play, active recreation and sport across Aotearoa, New Zealand. I think we can safely say we made a pretty good start. I know we have been thinking about our North Star was one of the big ones that came up yesterday.
Yes, and I think a lot of you would have appreciated Mavis's speech yesterday as well. Very inspiring, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Learning to be uncomfortable. We're really excited to be back again today and excited to be part of such an innovative approach to the summit this year, recognising, of course, the impacts that 2020 has thrown up because of COVID-19. The wonderful team has evolved the approach. We're running a national online conference here on this platform, and there are physical events being hosted by official hosts in the regions. So a big shout out today to the team at Active Auckland. I've got a hard act to follow because the Wellington crew had a big old day yesterday, but hi to everyone gathered at the local event in Auckland today.
Yes, hello and welcome in. Yesterday, an official event was staged by Sport Wellington, as Ricky has already mentioned. It was a fantastic event with more than 100 people with great discussions. So well done and welcome in if you're back joining us again today. Friday, it will be the turn of Women in Sport Otago and registrations are still open, so you can find out more on the digital hub for that one. We're also delighted to have satellite events taking place in Hamilton, in Napier, Gisborne and Christchurch as well. All events will be dialed into the national online program and running their own workshops and networking events. Each day between 1 and 4 p.m, this platform will be running a fantastic live agenda, and we're delighted to say that more than 1,000 of you have registered to join us over the 3 days. Incredible numbers.
Awesome. Very cool.
You'll be dialing in from all around the country, and we also have a few international guests as well. The summit is being run under the theme Change in Action. Last year, we looked at why women and girls were disadvantaged, and this year we're looking at how we can make positive change in the future. The content for the summit this year has been designed by a highly committed and passionate group of volunteers, and at the beginning of each day, we will thank each of the team for their efforts. They've been working alongside the steering committee and the operations team as well. Today, we will continue by focusing on Pillar 2, as Ricky has already alluded to, of the government strategy, which is participation. A special thank you to today's programming team co-chairs, Maddie McLean and Simone Spencer, along with the team members, Wendy Trolove, Alexi Treneth, Tanya Garrett, Emily Davidson, Rosalind Kerr, Kelly Kerr, Gordon Noble Campbell and Katie Owen. jump onto the Digital Hub to find out more about that team.
A special thank you again also to the workshop programming team, Lawrence Green, Robin Coburn and Esther Buckholt. We are keeping them busy in their meticulous planning for the workshop over the whole 3 days. And lastly, of course, before we get started, a special thanks to Suzanne McFadden and the Locker Room team for coming on board as the official media partner for Summit 2020. As you know, Locker Room is the only media, we can keep saying this over and over, the only media outlet in the country dedicated exclusively to covering women's sport. And we hope you've been following Suzanne and the Summit stories so far. Now, somehow I've managed to give myself the housekeeping again, so bear with me. Hopefully you've figured out how to navigate in and out of your sessions on the Digital Hub, the portal as we're calling it. The portal has a timeline, so if you want to go to each event, it will come up live as the event is due to start, and you need to click the join button. To the right is a session information there. That's a drop-down menu as well, and in some instances you will have to click through. It's really clearly signposted. There's also the meeting hub, which has informal networking to connect with other delegates if you want. And another tool that we would really encourage you to use is the discussion forum. You can post your comments about the speakers, even if it's just to give encouragement or a word of thanks, or also ask some questions there, just to share your thoughts about how things are going along the day. But fortunately, as we said, the tech team will be able to sort you into panels and put you in the right places, and will remind you how to get there as the day goes on. Just mention that Q&A function again quickly, and the discussion forum is all there, but we do have some pre-recorded sessions where obviously you may not be able to use the Q&A. If you have any technical troubles, there is some live support in place. There is a little button up the top. It's a little person wearing some red headphones, and that will be able to click on there, and you can go and talk to the tech team to help you get into the right place. And also quickly again, that meeting hub listed as an option to the right to discuss as we go on through the day. We reckon we've got it down today, so hopefully you guys have as well.
As long as we don't have a microphone on mute today. Well done, Rocky. That was a lot to wrap your head around, but I think I understand all of that now. Okay, everyone, it is time to get into it. It is our pleasure to introduce our second keynote address for Summit 2020. Late last week, the team was thrilled to especially pre-record this address for the Summit with Shiloh Curtis, Female Engagement Senior Manager at Golf Australia, and previously AFL Victoria's Female Football Development. This one is going to be a good one. I'm really looking forward to it. Shiloh has been instrumental in increasing the participation of women and girls across both AFL and golf. She will talk about managing change. So let's throw to the tech team now so they can play the keynote address.
Creating positive change in action. How do we do this to increase female participation in sport? I'm going to share today 3 learnings that I've used in my time working in sport over the last 15 or 20 years. These are my learnings, but whilst they're my learnings, I want you to consider, as I speak, I want you to consider your role. I want you to consider your management responsibility, and I want you to consider your organisation and your sport. I want you to consider the platform that you have to create positive change in action. Having a platform is a privilege. And what comes with that privilege is responsibility, because it's your opportunity to lead change in the community. Sport dominates our national conversation here in Australia, and I'm sure it's not too different in New Zealand. And when you have a platform that gets into the hearts and minds of your general population, surely that privilege affords you a responsibility to lead for the whole community. So to create positive change in action, we need to deeply understand our issues and their layers. But unfortunately in sport, we like to win. We like solutions. We don't like the discomfort of deep problems or issues. The issue of a lack or a low level of female participation in sport, not just on the field, but in our organisations, in our leadership structures, in our boardrooms. The issue of low female participation in sport is something that we deeply need to understand. Why is there such gender disparity? We need to understand our systems, our structures, and our culture that creates this disparity. For me, my first realisation of the systemic barriers in sport was when I was 5 years old. When I was 5, I realised 2 things. 1, that I was really good at playing Australian football. But 2, that I'd never get to play the game professionally simply because I was female. And it didn't matter how hard I worked, how fit I became, how skillful I became, how much I trained, I could never untrain being female. That door was closed for me. And the message that sport gave me as a 5-year-old little girl is that to be female is to be deficient, that you're not enough, that you're unworthy. Because if I was enough and if I was worthy, you would have a platform for me to play on, just like you've provided for the boys and men. So that's my first lesson in sport. Why did sport give me this message? We have to understand the context of sport and our history. In Australia, our national psyche is built on two things, war and sport, both of which have historically excluded women. Our invasion of Turkey at Gallipoli is seen as the birth of our nation. Whilst a massive investment and commitment to excelling in sport on the world stage is unparalleled. Sport has been built by men, for men, to the needs of men. So we've inherited a system, a structure, and a culture that has long been built with a masculine lens. And we've inherited masculine leadership philosophy, masculine leadership frameworks, masculine leadership personnel, and also masculine definitions of success. These things define our past, but they don't necessarily have to define our future. We get to create our future by taking action as leaders. So what action do we need to take to increase female participation in sport? We need to meaningfully engage women and girls. We've got to change the narrative that being female is enough. In fact, it's more than enough. We need to celebrate women and girls and our femaleness. And we've got to see femaleness as fantastic. We need to ask women and girls what they need, what they want, and then our job is to deliver it with them and for them. We need to be courageous, most importantly, be courageous to challenge those systems, structures, and cultures that have held women and girls back for so long. The learnings I'm going to share with you, like I said, come from my time working and playing in sport, because I did get to play footy. The boys let me play football at recess and lunchtime in primary school, and they let me play because I could kick and play like a boy. I was like them. I'd achieved their masculine definition of success. And I know this because other girls weren't allowed to play on the oval because they couldn't play like the boys. They weren't good enough to be let onto the oval. I joined the Victorian Women's Football League when I was 21. And I got to play mostly for Melbourne University over about 15 years. I got to coach an under-18 girls program. I got to captain a premiership. And in one of my best days of my whole life, I got to play in the very first women's game on the MCG in 2004. I also left being a school teacher to become AFL Victoria's Female Football Development Manager. And my responsibilities when I first started there were to run a few competitions and clinics for teenage girls. And I thought, that's pretty cute. But what about we run a national women's competition? I spent 10 years at AFL Victoria helping to build the AFLW competition. And now I work at Golf Australia as the National Female Engagement Senior Manager. And I want to share a few key things that I employ to try and increase female participation in sport. It's critical to create leadership buy-in. If you're going to affect change, you've got to get leaders to buy in. I'm a big believer that attitude reflects leadership. Leaders create cultural parameters. They define what is safe and what is unsafe, what is okay and what's not okay. And then their staff will follow that. Leaders have the ability to create buy-in or buy out. And if your leaders are bought out, your staff will also buy out, and that will be your culture. So I take this to my AFL example. In building the AFLW, we had heaps of, would we get enough sponsors? Would we get enough media? Would we get enough players? Would the parents want their daughters playing? But they weren't the biggest challenges we had. The biggest challenge we had in building AFLW wasn't external to the organisation. It was internal. It was convincing those senior key decision makers within the AFL that they had something, they had a game or something that they could actually sell. There was a lack of belief in the power and potential of the women's game. And that lack of belief was built into the systems, the structures, and the culture of the sport. So our task, we had to convince those senior key decision makers to buy in. We had to demonstrate that those men could win by investing in women and girls. We needed to understand what motivated them, what masculine frameworks and philosophies they were working to. We had to learn that language. And so, to demonstrate that they could win, that they could beat cricket and soccer and rugby, both of them, we had to demonstrate that girls wanted to play our game en masse. So we built mass participation at a grassroots level. And we made sure we recorded those numbers. We built record participation every year, and we reported those things up to those senior managers and started to demonstrate to them that there was a tsunami of girls coming through the ranks. We had to invest in the talent for when AFLW would arrive. Importantly, we had to ensure that those girls could play like boys. We had to achieve those masculine definitions of success so those girls would be let on the oval. And we had to showcase that talent in front of those senior key decision makers so that they could see for themselves that these girls could play just like the boys. I often get asked to compare and contrast my experiences in golf and in football. The power of leadership buy-in was very clear for me when I joined Golf Australia. In fact, it was part of the reason why I chose to join the organisation. The difference at Golf Australia is that the leaders within the organisation are authentically committed to the needs of women and girls in golf and in the broader community already. I'm not spending time internally trying to create buy-in because it's already there. Instead, I'm spending my energy and resources on creating an increase in female participation in the broader golf community. The Vision 2025 strategy, the National Gender Equality Strategy for Golf Australia, the birthplace of that came from authentic leadership, an authentic commitment from the leadership in the organisation to grow the game for women and girls and to create gender equality for them. There is this whole of organisation approach to gender equality as a result. We've delivered professional development for all staff, not just a few, but all staff, and every single board member at Golf Australia, so that they can understand, deeply understand the systemic layers of gender equality, sport, and the relationship to prevention of violence against women. We are doing the work internally to get our own backyard right. We're understanding and exploring our own system, structures and culture and challenging ourselves to evolve where we need to. Leadership that buys in will do the work. They'll do the work to understand the root causes of gender inequality, and they'll create change in action, that positive change in action that is needed to grow female participation. They'll do the work. So how do you create win-win situations for everyone? Especially when those people or those organisations might have opposing views. It takes innovation and creativity. At the AFL, my mantra was always to kill 3 birds with 1 stone. There was so much to do with so few resources that we had to be creative. I built an under-18 girls academy for the best 20 girls that we had at the time back in 2008. But we didn't have World Championships, Olympic Games. We didn't have the lure of these international events because it's a domestic sport. So how else could I provide something that was going to be value added for these girls, that would give us a point of difference, that would make us attractive, more attractive to those girls than other sports if we're going to build a national competition? So we built an under-18 academy, and in that academy, we made it about the whole athlete. It was never about the football. It was a part of it, but we wanted football to become a platform from which all these girls stood on, that the rest of their lives could leverage from. And we invested in their off-field capacity as well as their football capacity. We delivered for what they needed, but also what their parents wanted us to deliver for them as well. We built a holistic mental health and wellbeing program that focused on giving the girls the emotional intelligence capacity to be able to cope with whatever life threw at them. We found ways to tick other people's boxes. And to do so, we needed to listen, often to people that were opposing us. We needed to listen to them about what was important to them, what motivated them. And then we had to frame our work, reframe our work, so that it spoke on their terms. We needed flexible working strategies, and we were prepared to innovate traditional sporting structures. And if I think about an under-18 girls team that rocked up one day to play their first game, and they rocked up with 3 players. And now, for those that are uninitiated in Australian football, you need 18 players on a field in the traditional version of the game, so you can play your game. We had 3 girls that turned up, and I said, "You're playing?" And their coach looked at me quite bemused. And I said to the other team, "Lend them some players. We want these girls to play." So they evened up numbers. It was a scratch match, and off they went and played. The next week, those girls came back, but they had 6 girls on the team. Again, not enough to start an official match. I said to the other team, "Lend them some players, go and play." The following week, those girls came back, and there were 11 players. That was enough to record your first official match. By the end of that season, that team of girls had 25 players, and they'd had enough women to start a women's team for the following year. Now, if we had said to those 3 girls when they first turned up, "You cannot play because you haven't met the traditional benchmarks of the sport," we would have lost them. And we would have lost that group of women. We struggle to get the media to tell our story for us. And I'm a big believer, if a tree falls in the forest and no one hears it, you may as well not have even done it. So if the media did tell our story, it was often really sensationalist. It was a novelty. They focused on injuries, mad, bad, or sad. I spent a month at the Ladies Professional Golf Association in Daytona Beach in Florida in 2012 on an exchange program. And I discovered that they had many of the same issues that we did. I learned how the LPGA was using social media to create and control their own narrative. So I came home and I did the same with our girls. I taught them all how to use Twitter, and off they went. The impact of this was we could give kudos to our sponsors and supporters. We could make our own noise. We could tell our stories our way. We could be more than football. We could challenge stereotypes by showcasing our diversity. And the girls would produce the content, and all I do is retweet it. And we had a lot of noise going on there. In resistant environments, I learned to think creatively and find opportunities. And if I think of our time in COVID right now, I'm here in Melbourne. Think about COVID, a lot of people focusing on what we've lost. I've really worked hard to reframe my thinking to keep looking for the opportunities in the challenging environment that we're in. How can I use this time as a professional and a personal development experience so that I can continue to find opportunities and continue to grow my innovation and my creativity? And it's played a really important role in helping me get through this time. Finally, if you're going to try and continue to create change in resistant or challenging spaces, if you're going to persevere, you've got to know yourself and know your power. You've got to challenge those internal and those external voices that tell you that you're not enough. You are enough. You are worthy. You were born enough. It's the world that told us that we're not enough once we were born. You're not skinny enough. You're not tall enough. You're not feminine enough. You're not intelligent enough. The world has told us these things. We have learned these things, so we can unlearn these things. But you have to challenge those internal and those external voices that tell you that you're not enough, because you are. And in that, challenge yourself to be an empowered leader. And that is craft a vision of a world or a space that you want to create, and focus your efforts on creating that instead of reacting to the challenges and the resistance you face. Have the courage to take the game on, make mistakes, take risks, seek out challenges. Challenges are exciting. They help us to grow and learn. They help us get even better. So don't steer away from challenges, because they make us even better. I've shared some of the things that I've learned in creating positive change in action, but nothing changes if we don't act. Nothing changes if we don't choose to act. To create social change, it's often said you need 3 things: passion, purpose, and platform. Luckily, when you work in sport, you get to do all of those things. And there's opportunity in that. Your most powerful platform, however, is your time and place in history. That's your platform to facilitate change. A current time and place in history has never been so authorising or supportive to challenge gender inequality and to focus on women and girls' participation and diversity and inclusion. Your platform is right now. It is the present. Don't get to the end of your time in your role, whenever that might be, and regret not maximising the privilege that you have to create positive change in action. In closing, creating positive change in action pretty much defines leadership. Leadership's hard sometimes. It requires courage, and you have to show up every single day. Sometimes you've got to make decisions or advocate for things that are really uncomfortable. But leadership is a daily choice that we all get to make. You can choose to celebrate women and girls equally. You can choose to celebrate our uniqueness. You can choose to innovate and create the future. You can choose to buy out, or you can choose to buy in. The best bit of all of that is you get to choose. You get to choose what you do with your time and place in history. You get to choose what your leadership legacy will be. You get to choose to create positive change. But the best bit of all of that, you get to choose. Thanks.
Well, I don't know how you felt about that, but that was pretty inspiring from Shiloh. One of the things that I noted down here was her chat about the under-18 girls AFL team. They started off with 3 people, and just by getting the opportunity to actually participate, they went up to more than 20 by the end of the season.
It's the definition of what she said about taking the game on, right? Yeah, it's a great chat. I'd love to see Shiloh in person one day. Hopefully we get a chance to do that.
And just looking at the discussion form, fantastic that you're actually using the discussion form. Keep it up throughout the day. There's a comment here from Maddie, so inspiring. Love the idea of reframing to think creatively and find opportunities in resistant environments. So relevant. So it's really, really nice to hear that as well. Right, well, it is now time for our first official transition of the day, where we will move out of this session and on to the next one. So remember, this will be easy if you've done it all yesterday. You go back to your timeline and in a moment you'll exit out of this session, go back to your timeline, of course, and then you'll select session 2, which will feature both the update from Sport New Zealand and the special panel. So now you have about 20 seconds. So you do testing yourselves and us as well. Off you go.
Tēnā koutou katoa, te taua mai ranga, te taua mai raro, te taua mai roto, te taua mai waho, kia tau ai te maritu, kia tau ai te mari ora, tutu o whakamaua, kia tina, haumi e, hui e, tāki e. Ka nui taku mihi ki e tātou katoa, na uri a hinia hone, me ara ki te hā o hinia hone. Good afternoon and welcome. I started today with a karakia and asked that we create space that is calm, grounded and energizing. I made reference to Hinia Hone, which within a Maori context was the first woman to be fashioned from the sacred earth of Kura Waka. Hinia Hone was imbued with the gift of life from the Atua. Hinia Hone has provided her breath of life to all of us. So thank you very much. I really appreciate being here. Acknowledge Shiloh's point around the privilege of a platform, so I certainly intend to use that today. Firstly, I want to talk to you about the research that we're talking about. I think it's at this summit's a really important occasion, and I do want to acknowledge the great work going on behind the scenes for the amazing Whisper and Shift team who are working incredibly hard. The research around COVID-19 and participation for women and girls tells us a picture. And what I want to talk about is what that research tells us and also what Sport New Zealand is doing about it. So where are we right now? Sometimes the numbers do speak volumes. Overall, females from 5 to 50 spend less time participating in play, active, rec and sport than males do. The biggest gap is for 15 to 17-year-olds, with young women doing 4 hours less than young men per week. That is per week. For 18 to 24-year-olds, that gap is 90 minutes, but it's still a gap. Participation for girls peaks between 12 and 14 and then declines. For boys, the decline is less and it also starts later. On top of this, COVID-19 has thrown up some interesting stats and research. At alert level 4, when we were all locked down, we found girls spent less time being physically active compared to a typical April, but that was true for boys too, which probably isn't a surprise. What is interesting is that for women, this trend was reversed and they actually increased their participation during lockdown compared to the previous April. So lockdown was a barrier for girls, but it was an opportunity for women. Once alert level 1 returned, girls' participation bounced back to a normal level. But for women, this wasn't the same story. Their participation dropped to what was less than a normal level for that time of year. Women told us that other commitments were now taking priority. Perhaps the mental and the physical load that women predominantly carry was shared during lockdown before a life returned to a version of normal. So because of that participation gap, Sport New Zealand's focus is predominantly around the kohine, or the young women. So I'd like to run through 5 things that our research tells us about what young women want out of participating in sport and active rec and play, and I'll tell you what we're trying to do about it to make sure that we can meet their needs. Having fun, socialising with friends or whānau is a primary motivator. They want to feel safe, not feel judged. They want to keep fit and maintain their weight. Appearance and body confidence can be a huge influence at this age. They want to be able to participate at a level that suits their ability. Finally, they want activities that fit around their other commitments. From this research, it sounds like we're blaming young women, or they are the problem, but they're not. They're a product of our society, and we're often failing them by what we offer. Much of our research tells the same thing in different ways. At secondary schools, girls feel that they don't have the same access to gyms, courts, fields, because the boys are always using them. Within clubs and within schools, girls do not feel like they're treated fairly and equitably compared to boys. Girls also tell us they struggle with motivation or they're too busy, but they're also significantly more likely to say that they want to do more. All of this research piles up and suggests that we as the deliverers in the system are not offering what is meeting their needs. At the moment, we're interviewing young women to try and get a better understanding of the motivation barrier. So far, these are the kind of things that we're hearing. The joy has been driven out of the activity. Intermediate school is the last chance you have to try something new before you're too old. Girls are supposed to be mature, sit still, not have too much energy. For some young women, teenage years can be a perfect storm. Uniforms are too tight or revealing, confidence drops, school pressure increases, they're no longer enjoying their activity, so stopping can feel like a good option. As a group of leaders, and I know all of us on the call today will be leaders, we have to think whether or not we're part of the problem or we're working towards different solutions. We need to do more and we need to do better for our young women. So the big question is, how are we as a collective going to use this time and the research to learn and respond? The launch of the Women and Girls strategy in sport and active recreation was an important milestone, but many of you listening have been championing this cause for a long time, probably too long. However, the pandemic has given us a unique opportunity to accelerate our thinking and to challenge some of the systemic inequalities. The 265 million, that is a big number, Play Active Rec and Sport recovery package from the government has allowed us to increase our focus on women and girls. The new Te Manawa Active Aotearoa Fund is a good example of this. It's replaced the old Kiwi Sport, and we've doubled our investment to target programs and projects helping tamariki and rangatahi to get active. We've made it very clear this funding must target girls, and we've also extended the age limit to encourage programs for 18 to 24-year-old young women. Have a look at the Sport New Zealand website for more information on that funding. Last year, as some of you are aware, we introduced 2 new funds to support young women to be active. Through the Innovation and Activation Funds, we allocated $2.5 million and also provide a range of support, mentoring opportunities, so lessons and challenges are quickly shared across projects. 2020 has been a very challenging year for all of us. There's a relentlessness to this year, and the financial and emotional pressures have been huge. If you're feeling it, know that you're not alone. I certainly feel it. For the projects we funded, it was no different. Plans were continually changed, adjusted, and much of the activities reduced or postponed. But it was also an opportunity. So what have we learned so far? These projects are piloting and delivering innovative solutions that are challenging the status quo, providing quality experience and a range of activities across Aotearoa. And it's early days, but the feedback is really positive. As Mavis Mullins said yesterday, our young women have so much latent potential. The projects that we're working with young women to design and create the opportunities and activities are having the best results. Taking the time to listen, to respond to the young women's views, desires, reaps the benefits. Many of the solutions have been more creative, more fun, more engaging, more flexible. Secondly, allowing, supporting, and actively encouraging young women to take on leadership roles and delivery of activity both benefits those young leaders and also the participants. As was discussed on yesterday's leadership panel, leadership exists at all levels and in all forms. The desire for change and for wanting to be part of that change is a fire that drives many young women to do great things. Our role might be just to provide space, support, and power to do so. If I think about the motivations I shared at the start, there are several ways the projects are tackling these. Many focus on creating experiences that emphasize well-being, allow young women to connect, feel safe, and have fun. Young women are not one homogeneous group. They're different and have many differences between them. Some of those projects are adapting activities to include disabled young women, engaging better with Pacifica, or using bicultural frameworks to support their work. For the young woman who said, intermediate school is the last chance to try something new before you're too old, these projects are creating positive, inclusive environments where it is okay to learn something new, to make mistakes or to be silly. The sports look very different to they look on TV, and the activities such as skateboarding, mountain biking, or walker adventures provide great opportunities for young women. For a really long time, it's been okay for us to adapt sport for tamariki, but for our rangatahi, our teenagers, the only option has been the proper version of the game with the right uniforms. Thankfully, this is changing, but we do need to pick up the pace. I know that many of you will already be doing great work in the sector. So do all you can to share with others, as this is the space for continuous improvement and change. There are many other things I could have touched on today, and there is much more work to be done to better support disabled young women and our rainbow youth. Our broader diversity and inclusion work continues in this space. There's great panels, there's workshops today, and I encourage you to get involved, continue to have hard conversations, and be advocates for our young people, especially our young women. I conclude with these words, kia maya, kia taua, kia mana wahine. Let us be brave, let us prevail our adversity, let us be proud, honourable women and girls.
Thank you so much for the update, Laura. Some pretty stark information and research there too, but we know that so many of our leaders here at the summit this week have got some really great steps in place for our women and girls. Now, we've got a really exciting session coming up that Laura is going to be involved in. Again, we have a pre-recorded deep dive discussion looking at the experience of Muslim women and girls in sport and recreation in Aotearoa, It's looking at the research by Professor Holly Thorpe and Dr. Nida Ahmad at the University of Waikato. Now, this discussion was moderated by Laura Menzies, and while you are watching it, while it is pre-recorded, we're really thrilled to let you know that Professor Holly Thorpe, Dr. Nida Ahmad, and Ola Shaheen are here with us, and they're waiting to answer any questions. So we're going to open up the Q&A function. You can type in your questions, and they'll be able to respond to you live as you are watching their discussion platform from earlier on the experiences of Muslim women and girls in Aotearoa. So let's throw it over to the tech team now to play that discussion.
Tēnā koutou katoa, kia ora, welcome. Ko Laura Menzies aho. I'm the Diversity Inclusion Manager at Sport New Zealand, and I'm very delighted to welcome you to today's panel. Today is the official launch of a new report, Building Cultural Inclusion in Sport and Active Recreation, which has come from insights from Muslim women and girls in Aotearoa, New Zealand. This is the first of its kind in Aotearoa and highlights the voices and experiences of Muslim women and girls. The report explores the barriers and discrimination that many of the participants have experienced, but also highlights that many of the women and girls are overcoming challenges to still be physically active. The report challenges stereotypes and finishes with both recommendations and advice for the sector. I am very delighted today to welcome you to this panel. We have both the authors of the report and we also have two of the research participants. So I will start firstly by introducing our panel. I'd firstly like to introduce Professor Holly Thorpe, a sociologist from the University of Waikato. We have Dr. Nida Ahmed as a researcher from the University of Waikato. We have Ola Shaheen, who is a coach and a player from Manukau United Football Club. And we have Dr. Noha Nassif, who is a postdoctoral researcher at the Ritter Institute of Massey University and also an ocean swimmer. So firstly, welcome to the four of you. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Kia ora, Laura.
Kia ora. Okay, so let's get started. We've got a series of questions for you all about your experiences and also about this report, because it's a very exciting day. But firstly, I would just like to hand over to Nida and to Holly to just give us a bit of a sense of the report, how this research came about, and also what your findings are. So over to you two.
Thanks, Laura. It's a really exciting day for Nida and I to be able to finally launch this report, officially launch it. It has been the result of 2 years of work, and it's really been I'd say a labour of love. The report that is being launched today, it brings together two different projects, and Nida and I worked together closely with Sport New Zealand and Sport Waikato on the first project, which was focused in the North Island. It was funded by the University of Waikato, and this project had 38 Muslim women, aged and range from 16 to 69 years of age. And that was focus groups with those women. We also talked to a number of sports facilitators, so those that are involved in coaching or administration or running programs for and with Muslim girls and women. And for this project number one, the North Island project, Nida did all of the focus groups, and that was really important to us to make sure in terms of the methodology, it was led and done by a Muslim woman herself, and we really wanted to make sure we created a culturally appropriate, responsive methodological approach. And the second project was in Canterbury, and that was led by the Perception team, consulting firm down there with Sport Canterbury and other partners, including Christchurch City Council, Mainland Football and Canterbury Cricket. And their project wasn't necessarily focused on women and girls, but it had a really strong thread of that. So they did focus groups with 13 young Muslim girls, so aged 13 to 18, and also a lot of sports facilitators and those in the community. So the report that we're launching today brings together the key findings from both of those projects. So it brings together basically interviews and focus groups with over 106 different individuals, and the voices and lived experiences of more than 50 Muslim women across the country.
And in regards to some of these findings that were pulled from both these projects, what really came through was the importance of culturally and religious appropriate safe spaces, which offered women a sense of belonging, being welcomed into the community. And the important thing about this report was also the joys and pleasures around taking part in sports and active recreation. It was an important aspect of them, aspect for the women. And, it was a vital role in their mental well-being. It allowed them to develop bonds with their community members, with their family members. And there was also a range of challenges and barriers that also spoke through these interviews. Some of them were on the issues around clothing, where there was uniform restrictions, where there, for example, netball skirts or shorts, women were asked to remove their hijab on the football field. There was also a lot of the frustrations actually came from the lack of cultural understanding from sports facilitators. And there was kind of a repeated reinforce these stereotypical understandings of Muslim women, kind of like lacking of cultural misunderstandings that were coming through that a lot of the women expressed, and not feeling welcomed or be welcomed into the community, into these sporting spaces. And so with that, we also had offered some recommendations.
Yeah, and we're not going into a lot of details about the findings today, but the report has, so much richness there, and it has the voices of the Muslim woman basically on every page. So we can't do justice to that here, but we definitely, we worked really hard to make sure the multiplicities and diversity of Muslim voices are in the report. So yeah, the report is just a stepping stone in our eyes. It is we hope it to be a living document where people can take it up and use it to reflect, to think, to look differently at some of their practices. So towards the end of the report, after we've presented the methodologies and all of the key findings, we offer some key recommendations. One of these recommendations is for sports organisations, those that are out there working in the sector, to look at your policies. Are there things in your policies that may be restricting Muslim women and women from other cultural and ethnic groups in this country from participating, as Nida mentioned about uniforms? Are there things in your policies that actually we could revise without too much, real deep change, and actually make it much more inclusive? Another thing that we're recommending here is for sports organisations to invest in cultural education programs, and that came through really strongly from the sports facilitators who are out there working with the Muslim community, and they were saying, we're stumbling around, we'd really like some support, we'd like to know how to do things better. We would like this to come from the top down, from our organisations, to really investing the time and energy so that we can do better out in the sector.
And then another important recommendation is you have to understand the Muslim community is diverse. Muslim women are diverse. Individuals, look at the panel, it's diverse. Everyone's experience is going to speak to that. So when there are policy changes or programs being implemented, is actually include multiple voices of Muslim women. They're the ones part of the community. They are the ones that will be decision makers. So it's important to have the women, multiple women included into these conversations to have an important impact that trickles down, both upwards and downwards.
And kind of moving towards that, at the very end of the report, after a summary of the Waikato Symposium that we had in July, and some of the key kind of short-term and long-term strategies that the group came up with, which was both the Muslim women and the sports sector. At the very end, we have some reflective questions, because this is where good cultural practice starts from. We need to ask ourselves some critical questions about our own sort of assumptions, and we can all do that. We can do that today. We can, carve out 10 minutes and actually go, what are some of my assumptions in terms of the work I'm doing with the Muslim community, or I may be doing? How can I do things better? And so we have some reflective questions there, really with the aim to create a living document here so that people can use it to ask new questions about their own practice and that of their organisations.
Yep, and these questions, as Holly mentioned, it is like, what are the assumptions I have around Muslim women, as they participate in sports and active recreation. And the important thing is, who is around me, when you're in, especially in terms of cultural diversity, are representatives from the community within that group? How are you, respecting some of these cultures, understanding them, really understanding these different cultural understanding, having that cultural understanding and education around the communities you work with, because that's how you will create these safe spaces for people to participate in.
Yeah, I think underpinning the whole report, the symposium, this conversation today, it's about trying to create safe spaces for Muslim women to speak, to share their experiences, and for us as researchers or those working in the sector to recognise their lived experience as really important knowledge. And I will pass it back to you, Laura.
Thank you. Well, that is actually a perfect segue. If we actually want to hear the voices, then let's hear some of the voices. So firstly, Olaf, just to throw to you, you arrived in New Zealand as a 5-year-old. Can you give us a bit of your background? Kind of tell us the role that Sport and Active Rec has played in your life?
So I've literally been in active sports since I came to New Zealand. It's been what's formed my community. It's also what's kind of given me something that's helped with my mental health and helped with lots of other things. I played netball for 8 years when I came to New Zealand, and then went on to play Kiwi tag, and now I play football. So I've had a whole diverse experience in recreation sport, and it's something that I've needed. And I think every human being, whether they're Muslim, woman, or anyone, really needs in their life.
Thank you. And Noha, to you, you arrived in New Zealand as a teenager. Can you give us a bit of background about kind of the role it's played in your life up until now?
I think, growing up, even before moving to New Zealand, swimming especially has always been something that I truly enjoyed. I think probably my mother, I assume as soon as I was born, she threw us in the water, and we've been, me and my sister have been swimming ever since. And we just really, really love swimming. I've been involved as well with other sports like tennis and squash. But the water is basically kind of my sort of area where I feel more at peace, and I enjoy it very much. And that's what sports means to me. It's just basically something that is part of my life, and something that it just makes sense to incorporate in my life.
Thank you. And there is something very powerful about the water, there's no doubt. So Ola, just to you, I mean, you're obviously, you wanted to take part in this research. I know you both expressed to kind of how important you think it is. What is the things from your experience, your role in a football club in Manukau, what is it that you want people to take away from this report? What is it you want them to do from your perspective?
I think one thing is there's a lack of understanding, and there's a real clear difference, especially in the sports organisations, of where the diversity lies. Especially working for Manukau United, I also help out on the board and things like that, and you kind of see a lot of the stuff happening at the grassroots level, where there is a lot of cultural inclusion and understanding and opening up to the community, whereas I feel like when it's from the top down, there's not as much of that, and it could be as simple as just trying to understand different cultural groups and having that inclusion there. But it also is a representation. I think there needs to be a clear representation of how, even as simple as Auckland's one of the most diverse cities, but we don't see that diversity everywhere. I think that's quite important.
And from your sense, is it working to kind of push up from the grassroots, understanding that it also needs to come from the top down?
I think it definitely needs to come from the top down as well, from the grassroots. From the grassroots level, you can do as much and work as hard as you can, but it's not going to change if it's not coming from the top down too.
And now, just I think the session that was run at Sport Waikato back in July that Holly referred to I think that was a really powerful session. I'm wondering from your perspective whether there was anything that surprised you from the questions or the attitudes or the comments that came from the sports sector people who were in the room that day.
I think, well, actually, before I answer that question, I would like to mention the reason that you know, I am here, or the reason that, and my biggest goal from this is that it's obvious that New Zealand does want to make change, and we found that, or it was reflected from that, you know, the event that happened in Waikato. And so my biggest goal is to actually see women, and especially Muslim women, reach their full potential and get, you know, do the great things that they are very capable of accomplishing, without having to conflict with what their religious beliefs or faith, you know, what their faith tells them. And so that would actually inspire other Muslim women around the world to change for the better. And I think that New Zealand is in a really good position because of what we've been hearing from the rest of the world about how, even though we are so far away, we are so small, but the rest of the world is listening. And so we actually have a really great opportunity at the moment to make a global impact, to make change. And I think that the event in Waikato was a really good example of seeing how the you know, the facilitators were willing, you know, there's so many different sports facilitators that were willing to listen and wanting to understand, but at the same time also seeing the strength and the abilities of the Muslim women, and the fact that they were able to, you know, give their voices and speak with, you know, with such transparency and such honesty and such strength. So that was one of the things that I absolutely enjoyed. There is a lot of work, obviously, from that, because this is, you know, there is a range of beliefs. There's a range of understandings, interpretation of our religion, and you know, from you know, there's a varied perspectives and Islamic point of view, and you know, different women have different you know, understandings or of their own beliefs. And I think you know, based on that, there is. We need to emphasize that we need to educate, or Sports New Zealand and sports facilities do need to educate themselves on how even making small changes, you know, can actually make a big difference in participation of Muslim women in sports. And I think that probably came out in the Waikato event.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think definitely it was a really powerful room that day. Just a question for you, Nida, just around the kind of driver for this report, from your experience, how much of this for you is around that one-dimensional, some of those limiting stereotypes? How much of a driver for you for this research was that?
I mean, as a Muslim woman who's actually been researching on this topic for a long time, my own PhD looks at representation of Muslim women in the digital form. It was important to have this conversation here in Aotearoa, especially because there was, I think, maybe one or two research done around it, but not at that depth. And the importance of this research was that included both the voices of Muslim women and the sports facilitators, because this research that is being done outside about Muslim women, that does not often include even Muslim women that are part of the research team. So it was very important to have this Kaupapa Māori approach, you know, have the community, I guess myself leading this project in a collaborative effort, because collaboration is key as well, you know. So I think that was important. It's like getting the voices heard, getting into the community, working with a group of team, a diverse group of team across the sector. You know, got Sport New Zealand, Sport Waikato, researchers with the community. So that was kind of driving it to actually get the voices really out there instead of just interviewing just Muslim women or just the sports facilitators or just looking at policies. It was important to really get in there to really understand what was happening in Aotearoa.
Okay, thank you very much. We are drawing to an end of our very much quickfire panel. I do have a closing question for all of you. I think from that day in the Waikato, one of the things that struck me is that if we can make changes to help Muslim women and girls feel more included, there's also a lot of other benefits from that. A whole other range of women would feel more included, more engaged, more confident. If you had one thing that you would say to the audience today who's listening around a change that they could make, or advice around how they could make their environments more inclusive, what would that be? Starting with you, Holly.
Yeah, I think this is really important, and this is this has to start. This work needs to start now if it hasn't already. You know, we are hearing a lot about the need for cultural diversity and inclusion, but through our report, that is not what's being lived at the grassroots level. So, you know, the sector really needs, as Nida said, to step up here. And we are a multicultural society, and we need to do better in terms of understanding the diverse sporting and cultural needs of our communities. And one way to do that, there's so many ways, and there's many of them suggested in the report, but one way is to, for those in the sector, to ask your sports organisations, to ask the people that you work for to invest in a proper cultural education program to empower you with the knowledge to be able to go out and do better practice and have good conversations and to learn. And that's what I've been doing throughout this whole project, is learning through NIDA, through the Muslim Women, through our collaborations with Sport New Zealand, Sport Waikato. And yeah, this is a really important opportunity, and the time is now.
And I think for me, it's just get comfortable with getting uncomfortable. I mean, I guess I'm used to it. I put myself in very uncomfortable positions because that's where growth comes from. So I know I've heard a lot of sectors saying, I don't want to offend anyone, I don't want to be disrespectful. I'm like, of course you're not going to be disrespectful, but show up to the conversation, be okay. It is okay to get uncomfortable. It's you'll grow from it. You'll definitely grow from it. So just engage with the community.
I think it's to take the time to kind of be truthful with yourself about what you don't understand, what you need to understand, and help yourself grow from that knowledge. And talk to someone, talk to a Muslim woman. They're open to talk to you about anything and everything. And I think just having that step of just talking and educating yourself can make a huge difference.
I would say that just understanding that Muslim women do have this added layer of complication of trying to, incorporate their own beliefs into being active and playing sports. So things like the uniform, whether, wearing the appropriate things, and also the fact that most of us do stand out, which means that we are always, these targets for, racial abuse. And you do, especially, if you're and this is, you see it also in other minority groups. And so I think it's important that, for example, Sports New Zealand also thinks about issuing a statement on referees, on how referees should be dealing with, racial abuse, so that, the women can just focus on the game as opposed to just dealing with the nastiness around the game. And also I think it's important to engage with other, Muslim organizations out there in New Zealand that is already involved in keeping Muslim women active, supporting them, communicating with them, getting ideas from them. So, you've got, for example, the Islamic Women's Council of New Zealand, who, even though you're not aware, are actually doing work, but because of security and safety reasons, with threats and things like that, they do have to advertise differently. So just being aware, being able to engage with the Muslim community in different ways, and just, finding ways that you can encourage participation.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. Really appreciate the time from all four of you. I think if you are inspired, go away, write something down now, take some action, big or small. The link to the report should be in the chat. And if you can't find it there, look at the Sport New Zealand website under the news or the diversity inclusion section. So it's definitely a good read. I recommend you go and do that shortly. So finally, just want to thank our panelists, Professor Holly Thorpe, Dr. Nida Ahmed, Ola Shaheen, and Dr. Noha Nassif. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining us. No reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
That was such a fascinating discussion, and the discussion board is actually going off at the moment. There are so many comments here. Steph Murray said, so refreshing to hear a different perspective, a fantastic panel. Kate Smith, a very inspiring group of women. You'd have to agree with that, absolutely. So thank you so much to Laura, of course, for facilitating that. And a very big thank you as well goes to the panelists, Professor Holly Thorpe, Dr. Nida Ahmed, Ola Shaheen, and Dr. Noha Nassif.
Right, everyone, we've got a pretty big transition coming up. So we've got 6 minutes or so to have a break. Before you have that break, though, we want you to get sorted into your next panel. We've got 2 choices of what session that you choose to go into. Hopefully you have pre-registered for them. They are really clearly labelled back out on your timeline, but panel 1 is for our system influencers. So if you're an administrator, a CEO, manager, board member, academics, media sponsors, that is for you. That's looking at participation strategies, from an NSO and ARC-ST perspective. So that is panel 1. It should be pretty clearly labelled. Panel 2 is for direct deliverers, our coaches, officials, players, anybody who's an activity provider, and this is looking at non-traditional delivery. We've got 2 great facilitators who'll be standing by with the panels, 15 minutes or so of presentations and 15 minutes of Q&A time. So this is a great opportunity to get your questions in. So what we want you to do is go back to your timeline, select the panel that you hopefully pre-registered for. If you didn't pre-register, go to your preferred panel. The tech team will then manually assign you, and just hopefully there's enough room to put you into that one that you wanted to. So panel 1 for our system influencers, panel 2 for our direct deliverers. Head back to your timeline, get into your panel, then go and make a cuppa, and we'll see you back shortly.
Tēnā koutou katoa, malo soifua. I begin by acknowledging the Hakianga, the people and kaitiaki of Waikato Tainui, where I'm dialing in from today. Thank you all so much for joining this exciting panel discussion today. And in line with the theme of this year's summit, Change in Action, and today's specific focus on participation, we have a panel of 3 exceptional women who will provide different views on ways that organisations can proactively support increased participation of women and girls in sport. It is my privilege to introduce Nicole Dunn from New Zealand Cricket, Head of Female Engagement, who will be speaking to the Year Girls Cricket program aimed at 10 to 17-year-olds. Kia ora, Nicole. I'd like to also introduce Megan Grayson from Auckland Rugby, female rugby manager, who will be speaking about creating girls-only grades in club rugby in Auckland. Kia ora, Megan.
Kia ora.
And finally, Simone Spencer, who is actually one of the co-chairs of today's program. So thank you very much, Simone, for all your work that you've put into today, and is actually the portfolio manager at Active Auckland. Simone will address the Auckland Regional Coach Developer Program, which aims to create more women in coach development roles in coaching and in the coaching pathway, and also with this a network of women in this field. So kia ora, Simone.
Kia ora, Sarah.
Obviously today is all about participation, so please feel free to flick into the Q&A function. It's open and we will do our best to answer any questions. Ask any questions of these women or feel free to make a comment. But let's crack into it. Nicole, with the Year Girls program, how did you identify the need for such a program?
Well, kia ora, Sarah. We started at New Zealand Cricket. We commissioned a report in 2016 called Women in Cricket, commissioned by Sarah Beeman. And that looked at all aspects of female engagement in the sport. It painted a pretty bleak picture, unfortunately, for our participation. And there was a number of initiatives that came out of that report, a number of recommendations. And Year Girls was one of those initiatives. And it's all about getting young females engaged in cricket for the first time. It really looks at how we can break down those barriers using new delivery methods, and also redefining sort of what is cricket. It doesn't have to be a long, boring day standing out in the field. It can be very much an action-packed sort of 60-minute session, and that's for our girls and for their parents as well. Because as sort of Mavis pointed out in her keynote yesterday, a lot of the participation decisions are driven by the parents as well. So that was really the driver for us, was to create some change. Cricket in New Zealand has a mission of being a game for all New Zealanders and a game for life. So we really needed to create a program that appealed to our young females in order to really bring that vision to life.
And what about you at Auckland Rugby, Megan? How did you go about and creating and implementing your program?
So I suppose to test the need and to kind of get the data on what I needed of how girls wanted to participate, I piloted a 6-week program that was targeted at non-contact grades, so that's Ripper Rugby in under 9, under 11, just to see if there was a market and if this was something that the girls wanted. So after a really kind of successful 6 weeks, I put it to the rugby committee as such and said, hey, these girls want to play. Let's create a space for them. And then 6 months later, we had 42 teams sign up for the 2019 season. So going from 0 and having no female grades or no girls grades or girls only grades in rugby to having 43 new teams in the space of a season was huge. And it also showed us very clearly that girls wanted to play, but they wanted to play in the way that they choose, i.e. they didn't want to play tackle with the boys, which was their only option. So they can still do that if they want to, but they can also play in girls' teams. They can play in contact, non-contact. So we just gave them the space to get involved, and they loved it.
That's amazing growth. And obviously you need people to coach these 43 different teams. Simone, how did you go about identifying the need for obviously more female coaches?
So one of the things, obviously, when Sport New Zealand's Women and Girls strategy came out, was that there was a really strong case for change that was, and really useful insights that were provided. And within that was, really clear data that showed that only 33% of women were represented in coach development roles. And in turn, at a high performance level in terms of coaching, there was really low engagement. So from a community sport perspective, it seemed pretty critical that we needed to provide opportunities for more women to be coached by women as such, in order to create that pipeline, which would help contribute to the broader system as such. And I think, when you talk to Megan and Nicole, they can very much talk to the impact that women providers or deliverers or coaches have in working with young girls. And it's the whole premise of you can't be what you don't see. And we want to use sport and recreation as a platform to unleash the potential that we all have as women and girls. And so why shouldn't we offer opportunities at all types of levels for people to do that?
So off that, Nicole, who were the critical people involved in the development of your initiative? And I guess, how did you identify them?
Yeah, I guess similar to Megan with a pilot, that was the first step in Year Girls. So in 2019, there was a pilot in 7 different locations around the country. And I guess exactly like Megan mentioned, it's really giving people what they want, testing out a few different options and learning from that, and then rolling it out wider the following season. So sort of our kind of key people were absolutely our associations around the country, both our major associations, our district associations. They're the ones on the ground in the Cricket Network delivering the program. This year, this season, we're just sort of getting underway, and we've got a network of around 50 activators. We call our coaches activators in Year Girls because they do kind of mix it up from your traditional kind of coaching. So they're our key people on the ground that are getting out amongst the schools, showing the girls what the program's about, and then recruiting them to come along and get involved in a hub. So it's definitely a team effort and lots of different people that have really strong knowledge of their communities, and taking that sort of national framework and delivering it locally in the way that's best going to suit their community. So definitely a team effort to get it to this point.
And what about you, Megan, in terms of the critical people involved?
I suppose, and what Nicole touched on before was the parents being heavy involvement, very much the same in rugby. We've got a very passionate nation, and passionate when you're on the sideline of a rugby field. So it was a couple of those passionate parents who really drove it within the club system under our guidance. They also helped me create the surveys and give to the girls to be able to have that voice of the participant. So for me, I've been at any opportunity getting surveys or workshops with the girls to say, did you like playing like this? Do you want to play? Do you want to play on a Saturday? All of that kind of stuff. So the voice of the participant is very much at the center. And so much that when we conducted our reviews, yes, they came from the parents, but at the same time, it was, we're looking and listening to the girls where knocking the ball on made them uncomfortable. And so we changed it. And obviously that was something, or changed the rules, sorry. And that was something that was quite hard in a rugby system, because when they look over and they see that the boys play like this, and this is how the girls should play. And when I was presenting a concept of knocking the ball on and carrying on for an 8-year-old, it was a bit mind-blowing. So in terms of the critical, it is definitely the girls, and they've probably been the biggest driving force, because it was hard to say no when these girls said, we want to play and this is how we want to play.
And Simone, you mentioned about Megan and actually Nicole being involved in the program. Who else has been involved in the development actually of the initiative?
For us, I guess really important was obviously that buy-in of the leadership within our organisation, which was fantastic. But then also the buy-in of other women who are in the coaching space, that there is a real need to be able to provide opportunities for women to learn and grow on their own. And I guess the understanding of what that type of environment might look like, because when we delivered our Auckland Coach Developer program for the first time, it wasn't that the content was particularly different, it was about the environment that we created for those women. And I think from memory, Megan, you might have been on that very first course with us, which was really unique in that, having delivered a number prior of mixed gender courses, the types of conversation and the depth of where we went and the vulnerability that people were prepared to show was significantly different to when we have had women in mixed gender environments. And it was amazing that in doing that, it created more trust and a greater connection, which has then meant that those women have gone on to support each other and collaborate a lot more. And in turn, understand the benefits of replicating that type of thing in their own environments and contexts.
Yeah, and I think that's super powerful, that initial empowerment and then the empowerment out from the fellas. So really acknowledge that. And I think, Mavis touched on it yesterday about we need to do that more. Hey, we've got a question actually from one of the participants, and just keep firing them away in the Q&A function. I'm not going to tell you how to do that because I don't know. So it's actually to Nicole. Are Pacifica Girls a group you are trying to engage with more? And that's
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, Pacifica, both girls and boys, are very underrepresented across cricket as a sport. And Year Girls is all about getting first-time cricketers involved. So part of what I mentioned before around our associations deliver the program locally, we put a big emphasis on not just going into your traditional schools that already have cricket. Like, let's look at our lower decile schools where cricket isn't a strong sport, and also working closely with community groups and aligning a Year Girls Hub with a particular group, whether that be cultural or otherwise, so that we can break into different areas of each community. So we're really pushing that on a local level. I know when we look specifically at Pacifica, our Wellington lead, they're currently planning on a Pacifica hub within Porirua, and working with the local Samoan community group there to specifically try and get more Samoan girls involved. So although that's only one hub out of the whole country, going back to the sort of pilot theme as well, is that we need to try these things in local areas and then spread them throughout the country as well. So certainly trying to get new girls playing cricket is a big thing for us.
Change in action. So let's go to Megan. What were some of the key milestones along the way, either people or process, that supported the change, including, I guess, the impact that kept you going to validate the work that you were doing?
Yeah, so I suppose some of the key milestones were along the lines of, like I said before, the amount of teams that turned up for the season. As such, we had a junior girls launch, which hadn't been done in our history as such, because you just started junior rugby. So we had hundreds of girls out on Eden Park number 2, really launching the season. We had Black Ferns down there, had lots of little games. So that was something that was really kind of validating for myself to say, cool, we've done something, and now every Saturday these girls can play. I suppose little bites along the way is when I can see girls teams posting about it on Facebook, or I can see, and then and then they'll either tag me or tag Auckland Rugby to say here, and that's when our clubs have brought shirts for them. They have thought about their toilet systems. They are now attending girls only small blacks, which is our coaching accreditation things. So it's that real feeling like they genuinely enjoy having girls involved in their system. And because when you bring a 9-year-old girl, it starts turning the cogs in a male dominated club. And we've got some of them who have strong history, and girls isn't even a thing. So I suppose for me, it's probably been little milestones since then, and seeing the involvement and the continued involvement there, and just how willing our community is to open the doors to something different, to grades that are different, to playing days that are different. I've introduced an under 15 girls tackle, and they're playing on Friday nights. So on Friday, and they can play netball or hockey or whatever they else want to play on every other day of the week. But it's our club starting to think about something different and just giving the girls an opportunity, and it's flourishing, which is really cool.
And what about you, Simone? What were some of the key milestones for you in the coach development program?
The very first course that we delivered was obviously a huge milestone in that we had 16 women sign up. It was designed by women for women. And from that, we were able to then create a really great network. And I think really pivotal to the work in that space, and I can I guess it connects with what everyone's talking here in terms of how do we increase participation, is that we ask women and girls what they want. We believe them when they tell us what they want, and we change what we do to meet their needs. So as an example, the very first extension workshop that we did with that group, we asked them what they'd like, and they wanted to do something on burnout, which was not what we would have expected at all, but was something that was really important to them. And so I think, really thinking about what you're doing and why you're doing and who it's actually for is really critical in order to allow that space and choice for women to actually participate in their own way, which we know is really important.
Absolutely. Nicole, on to you. What were some of the, I guess, people that helped support you along the way and creating impact?
Yeah, and I guess it come back again to the team of activators, that they're the ones that have the impact on the ground. And I kind of would see it that more I'm supporting them more than them supporting me. So we are very proactive in that we'll facilitate and discussions every week throughout the season. We don't wait till the end of the season and then look back and think what could we have done differently. So we get the activators talking to each other, not just to me. We'll get them different groups from around the country together on a weekly basis. And definitely, I think the biggest impact is when they're sharing ideas, their successes, but also their challenges, and they're problem solving themselves on what's some really good ways to either get more girls engaged or what activities the girls enjoyed. I think one of the best things about young females is they're not shy in telling you what they enjoy and what they don't. So it's been really good for that kind of communication and support to happen with this kind of growing network of activators. So I certainly see them as the doers, and I do what I can to support them from an NSO level.
And I think it's incredible that you're not only growing the participation side, but from the activators side, you're also growing not only their participation in sport, but their capabilities as well with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's been, I think, a big part of being able to grow the program. The capability of the activators we can see has a direct impact on the success of each hub. So this season we've kind of put in a training program, and we did have a training program before, but we've kind of increased that from 1 module to 3 modules, and investing a lot more time in making sure that we're giving our they're not all young female activators. We do have a few young males, so acknowledge the lads that are out there as well, but putting a lot more resource into making sure they can do their job well, and they can develop themselves as well throughout that process.
And on the lads, actually, we've got a question from Stephen. Thanks very much for asking, Stephen. Probably I'll direct this to you, Simone. When girls are and players and teams, when you're not able to find a female coach, Stephen's wondering, what do you see as the most important elements of education of males to tailor their delivery for females? And we've touched on it a little, but interested in your thoughts, Simone.
For me, I think the most important thing is that we don't generalize about people, and we treat everyone on an individual basis. And so, we need to know that and get to know the individual in order to understand them and what's going to motivate them. And I think that critical, to girls and women participating is the need to have male champions and allies who want to support them to do so. So it's not that I think the only way is to have, women coaches for all women athletes. It's not what we believe at all. But I think we need to, educate ourselves also to understand the differences, which tend to be more physical than making assumptions about behaviours and whatnot. So I would say if you want to work with women and girls, you need to understand the physical differences between them and their male counterparts in the first instance. And from what I'm seeing, that's an area that we can really help coaches with.
Great. So I guess, Megan, you have from rugby, very traditional male dominated environment, changing, which is great because of people like you. But what are some of the, I guess, internal and external barriers that you've faced, and how have you overcome them? Or overcoming them?
Yeah, overcoming is the word. And look, and I don't believe it's any fault of our own, in terms of it's a system that was created for males by males a long time ago. And in terms of females being involved in rugby, it's probably, we're a good 100 years behind them as such. So our weight grades that tailor to an 8-year-old boy obviously stop working for a girl once she goes through puberty. Our prizes, the way we pay males versus females, like we've got a deep embedded structural system that tailors to create All Blacks. Every 8-year-old's going to turn into an All Black, so we've got to make sure that they're on the pathway right there. We know that women and girls, they start being involved in rugby a lot later. So in terms of the things that we need to do to support a 20-year-old entering the game versus an 8-year-old boy entering the game are completely different. So what I face a lot is the question why. Why do we need it? Why should it be different? And I suppose my challenge back, or my advice there, would be that I'm not necessarily looking for equality, and I don't believe that everything that happens in the boys' game should happen in the girls' game, and that we should have exactly the same grades or all of that kind of stuff. Mine would be an equity stance. So I challenge back to say, if there's no reason why these girls can't play in a non-traditional version of rugby, and no one's got a really good reason as to why we should say no, then we need to give them the opportunity. The way that I suppose I not fight, we have lots of discussions, but the way we go back to say why there is a need for change is like I said before, I back myself with a lot of evidence, either directly from the girls or from our communities. So parents, both male and female, they want their girls to be able to play rugby. So from a parent perspective, they give me that ammo. From a girl's perspective, they tell me that they'd like to play it this way and this way, and they've really, very created the grades that we offer now. And we're in that slow process of just filling out, I suppose, the things that we're missing. But I make sure that I'm equipped. So I do workshops, I do surveys, I collect data from the girls, I get anecdotal data from how they felt about the experience, that actually they weren't worried about being tackled, they were worried about the girl next to them judging them about dropping the ball. So when I have all of that information, when I have information around puberty and girls, and I bring it to a largely male group, they don't usually question that kind of stuff, but at the same time, they can't really say no. So be well equipped, have the information, have the participant at the center, in terms of what they want and how they want it. And then the system's going to flow. I don't believe that we are adverse to change, but it's just something that they haven't done before. So it's something that our rugby system hasn't done before. As I said, we I think we're the only PU in the country that has an under 13 girls tackle grade. So it's, it's revolutionary stuff for girls being involved, but it is all new. So it will take time for our system to catch up and to be tailored properly, but we're at a good starting point.
Can you just elaborate on PU for the listeners?
Sorry. That's provincial union. So under that national level, yeah, Auckland's that big large area in the middle there.
Brilliant. And Nicole, I'm a bit nervous to ask futuristic questions at the moment, but it's very easy to ask this question a year ago. But what does the next 6 months look like for you?
Next 6 months, we're just coming into the cricket season at the moment. So we're full swing with year girls as soon as we get back into term 4. So we deliver through term 4 and term 1. So if all goes according to plan, this term, this season, we'll have about 120 year girls hubs throughout the country. So it's a pretty big jump from where we were in term 1 at the start of this year. So we're looking for a pretty big increase. We're looking for a lot more girls being involved, a lot more hubs, and we've increased our number of activators as well. So we know we want to get to a place of a lot more girls participating in cricket. We don't necessarily know how we're going to get there, and we're certainly learning and evolving the program as we go. So the next 6 months is certainly about all of our activators rolling out hubs, getting as many girls as I can along as possible, learning for those experiences each week, and making continuing to make a bigger and better program as we go. So a little bit into the unknown, but yeah, that's sort of what the journey is all about, and working closely with other sports and other codes and learning from each other as well. So to definitely echo what Megan was saying, like there's going to be barriers there, but the more information you arm yourself with, the better. So we're similar. We survey the girls, we get direct feedback, we look at trends from Sport New Zealand, talking to other codes and seeing what's working for them, what they're finding. The more information you can arm yourself with to kind of push back against those that are pushing back against the advancement. I definitely agree with what Megan was saying as well.
Great. And I just think the momentum that you are generating ahead, both of you, ahead of the World Cups that we have in New Zealand is, incredibly exciting. And I just keep it up, I think. Yeah, it's awesome. Simone, what about you for the next 6 months?
We'll look to continue to engage with our women coach developers. I think one of the best benefits of it is just seeing the phenomenal increases in confidence that these women feel, and seeing them progress into more leadership roles that perhaps they wouldn't have stepped into before, plus the ongoing support that they provide each other and the ability to reach out and connect to each other and know that there's, they're all in it together, so to speak. I think the benefits of that, just can't be explained. And one of the most interesting things is that I always have men go, but what do you do? and there's not anything special particularly that we do apart from just come together and really support each other. And there's this real sense of a common purpose to want to advance, opportunities for women and girls. And that flows all the way down to then, the impact that they can have on participants. And I think that's the real key driver, that we, in many instances, may not have had great experiences ourselves. And it's really awesome to be able to go and change that for others. And that's that whole change in action, right? Isn't it? That we've all got an opportunity to make a choice, to go out there and to do something to help someone else. And for me, I feel like I have a responsibility that if a door is open for me, I'll pull someone else through with me. And the expectation is that they're going to do the same thing. And that's a greater good, right? That we can all make a contribution.
We can. Another question from the participants. Thanks so much. The final few minutes. So if you have any burning questions, get them in that Q&A function. I'll throw this one to you, Megan. What is the approach of inclusion for female and girls in ethnic communities in your program?
Yeah, so much like Nicole, we run a Games for Girls program in Auckland, which we employ our female high performance, our Storm players, and so there are some of our Black Ferns. We employ them to go into schools, and we've had some really good success with that really tailored approach in terms of females delivering to females. But what's really, really awesome about the diversity of players that I actually have access to is that they can connect with communities that maybe, for example, that I couldn't connect with. So we were doing a program out west, and some of the girls would come along and they spoke Samoan fluently, and obviously I couldn't. But my coaches, being from that background, turned around and was able to feed off them, and then the girls responded very well. So in terms of targeted approaches there, like I said before, we use at any opportunity to learn and understand. We're going into Muslim schools and specific Muslim schools, and it is about us working with the school in terms of traditions, in terms of anything that we can learn from the girls that would make them feel more comfortable to be involved. And if the reality is that actually they only going to do non-contact and it is ripper tags by the side and it must be female coaches delivering in there, then that's how we tailor our program to create it. And so it's about, I suppose, morphing what you deliver and creating an environment where your sport can be delivered to all, but in a way that they choose. And if the way that they choose is X, Y, and Z, then they learn it, let's adapt, and then deliver. Because girls want to be involved, and they're just maybe cultural barriers along the way, or parents don't think it's traditionally, rugby's a big one. It's not traditionally a sport for an Asian or Indian community. And so it is about how do we get these girls feeling confident with a concept of rugby to take a step. And that's all we're hoping to do with our works within this school. And it's not about that we want every girl to go and join a rugby club on a Saturday. If they're comfortable just playing with their schoolmates during the day, and that's enough for them, then that's awesome for us. It's just about feeling good with rugby or feeling confident kind of within themselves. An example of that one is where we targeted a high decile Indian school. So it had a high population because it was fitting within our targets. And some of the feedback from the girls was, I'm stronger than I thought. And lots of little things like, I thought I couldn't do it. By the end of the session, I'm actually better and I'm braver than I thought I was. And so those little light bulb moments, that's enough for us, is that they think that they can do it, or they feel comfortable to play and that they'll do it. Yeah, so definitely learning all the time from those communities, and then adapting and changing and going back the next week to deliver it differently for them.
It definitely leaves a smile on your face, and you can see yourself lighting up when you talk about it, Megan. Nicole, just finally, can you share with us a moment that has left a smile on your face from the work that you've done?
Yeah, I'd probably say it was a phone call a few weeks ago I got from one of our lead activators, Mel Hansen, who's in the Wairarapa, and as part of her plan this season, she had identified a low decile school she really wanted to get cricket into, not a big cricket school, and through her relationship that she developed with the teacher, they're now rolling out the program is compulsory for all their year 5 to 8 girls through term 4. So we'll have about 100 girls experiencing cricket for the first time through the Year Girls program. And that's down to obviously Mel's hard work on the ground there over a few seasons, but seeing that kind of progress, yeah, that really is quite fulfilling.
And Simone, finally for you, a moment that's left a smile on your face.
At the end of one of our 2-day courses, when we were kind of reflecting on the journey that we'd been through, one of the women that had been in attendance said that when she'd arrived on the first day, she'd been so petrified that she sat in her car and contemplated whether she was even going to be able to be able to walk into the building, because she didn't feel good enough. She wasn't confident, would she be judged by other people? And she said that as soon as she came into the room and she saw all these welcoming, friendly women who were all in the same boat as her, that she knew she was in the right place. And that left a huge smile on my face, because if we can enable someone like that to take that step, then, that's a really good start.
Awesome. Well, just on reflection for me, from what I've certainly taken away from our chat this afternoon, I think some of the key points that I'm hearing is that you've gone to your communities to ask them what they want. And that's really critical into being able to implement sustainable change, to make change into action. And I think Mavis summed it up nicely yesterday when she said people matter. And so if you're asking someone to do something that they actually don't want to engage in, then you've got a problem. And you've each found creative ways of doing that. And I think finally is that patience. It does take time, as I'm sure you've all told us, but it's been persistently patient that I'm hearing in your programs, which has helped create success. And so I just want to acknowledge you, Nicole, Megan and Simone, for being so willing to share your learnings and insights. I know that people will have got so much out of them. If you have time, put it in the Q&A function, because I think that's really powerful. Tēnā koe. I see you, we see you, and we see the work that you are doing for women and girls, and we thank you. Whawhitai lava to everyone for joining us joining in on this panel discussion today, and we'll just go back to the main screen and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you very much.
Cool. Thanks for having us.
Kia ora, everybody. My name is Fran McEwen, and I am the Active Recreation Lead at Sport New Zealand, and I'm also the volunteer CEO of the Shift Foundation. And I'm very lucky to be chatting to you today and with our wonderful panelists in the direct delivery panel session. So participation is my favourite pillar of the strategy, so I'm really honoured to be doing this. So thank you for joining us. We are just going to start by some Digi etiquette. So really important to remember that you've got a question function. So you can put your any questions that you've got for our panelists into the Q&A function. And also anything that you want to chat, or any, if you want to awhi our panelists, please give them some nice feedback. In the background, I've got Maddie McLean, who is the Participation Programs Coordinator at New Zealand Golf. She's also a board member of the Shift Foundation, and she will be in the background compiling any questions that you've got and sending them through to me on Facebook Messenger, because we are using all of the different technologies while we're doing this. So the way we're going to run this session is we've got some sort of general questions to get our panelists started, and then a couple of specific questions that relate to their mahi that they're going to be talking about, and then we're going to have a gap for questions from the audience. So we welcome you to send them through. I guess the context that's really important for us to talk about here is that this is very much about sharing knowledge and experiences to achieve meaningful and relevant change for women and girls in the sport and recreation context. And it is more focused on the how. So we're not talking about so much about the why and why things need to change, but much more about the tangible how. So hopefully you've joined us if you're somebody that's interested in how we change from a direct delivery sort of perspective. So enough waffle from me. I will introduce our wonderful panelists. So first we have Teresa Barham from Netball New Zealand. She is based in the Hawke's Bay and is responsible for implementing the Netball New Zealand youth engagement and retention strategy and advocating for rangatahi. A key element of bringing the strategy to life is working with netball centres across Aotearoa using Fast 5. And I'm sure you all know, but for those of you who don't, that is a modified version of netball. That acts as a vehicle to engage, co-design and implement adapted delivery models that keep girls and young women active and provides leadership opportunities. So you'll hear from her in just a minute. Next, we have Wendy Trolive, and Wendy works at Sport Waikato and is the initiative advisor for This Is Me. She's the Women and Girls Initiative Advisor at Sport Waikato, and she's leading the This Is Me work, which is a targeted intervention aimed at encouraging and supporting and celebrating women and girls to move their bodies in a way that works for them. Wendy is on the ground connecting with communities, secondary schools and local providers to support change in delivery and opportunities that meet the needs of female participants. And finally, we have Bailey Tamaipi from Onboard Skate, and Bailey is a skate instructor working on the Kapiti Coast. Onboard skating is more than just about learning to skateboard. It's much more around a movement that focuses on developing the confidence and well-being of girls and young women using skateboarding, which we all know can be a male-dominated sport. They deliver programs, Onboard Skate deliver programs across the Wellington and events across the Wellington region. So those are the three amazing panelists that we have with us today. And the first question that they're each going to talk to you about is how they identified, or how did you identify the gaps or opportunities for your initiative, and what led you to what led to the change being delivered and implemented? So we're going to start with Wendy.
Kia ora koutou, everybody. Thank you for having me on this panel today. Thanks, Fran, for the introduction. As Fran mentioned, I'm the Women and Girls Initiative Advisor at Sport Waikato, and we have an initiative called This Is Me, which targets women and girls around our region. So through local and national insight, as Laura alluded to in the keynote from her earlier today, we know that women and girls aren't as active in physical activity, recreation, play and sport compared to their male counterparts. So what we do know is the good thing is that they understand why it's really important for them to be active and why it's good for them, yet their current experiences are often leading them to that dropout. So through This Is Me and our connections made, gaps have been identified in current offerings and opportunity that their needs aren't being met. And today I'm going to be using one of our projects that we worked on with a local community around netball. And we know that the standard 7-a-side traditional form of netball is pretty accessible, but that's not necessarily inclusive to all women and girls. So we worked with a local community member who came to us after she'd been away in the UK and was exposed to walking netball. So if you're not familiar with walking netball, it's a slowed down version of the game, very adaptable, very flexible. But the key changes are that there's no running or no jumping, so a lot more inclusive to all women and girls out there. She came to us and said, how can we do this in our community? How can we support that? She'd already been chatting away to some of her friends to see what the interest was, and the idea sort of stemmed and flowed from there as to how we could launch a pilot for her community.
Kia ora. Over to you, Bailey.
Kia ora, Fran. Kia ora koutou. So I work for a company called Onboard Skate. My boss, Steve Hodges, started Onboard Skate in 2012 up in Auckland. And at the beginning of that, he was doing general, just all kids, boys and girls, and doing lessons in schools and community sessions, and noticed that he'd start a session and then the boys and girls were there, and then the sessions following on from that, it would just be boys, just the boys coming along to those sessions. So figured that he needed something for the girls, and something that was going to be more accessible and possibly away from skate parks as well, so that girls weren't worried about others watching them. So he started girls sessions up with female instructors up in Auckland, and in 2018 he moved down to Palmerston North and started some sessions up in Palmy as well as Wellington, and I started working with him there. And it was the same thing down here. There were heaps of girls keen, there was just no space for them, and no one offering them the opportunity to skate together, because it's something that girls want to do together rather than on their own, and it's less intimidating as well when you're with a bunch of mates skating together. So yeah, that's how that worked.
Cool, thank you, great context. And over to you, Teresa.
Kia ora koutou from Ngāti Kahungunu in the Hawke's Bay. So thanks, Wendy, for the introduction to walking netball. I have actually tried that, and it is actually a really tough game to play with the no jumping and the walking as well. So from netball's perspective, we've got a really rich history, as most of you will know, as a traditional sport for women and girls, and created some spaces over time for women and girls to have their space. But currently at the moment, just to give you one example, 90% of our centre boards are female, but however, so to paint the landscape as the gap to identify, the decline in participation in the rangatahi space had been gradual and reasonably steep over the last 10 years. So we were really lucky. We had the Year 7 and 8 reps replaced with Year 7 and 8 player development approach, so really got enabler. And the next part of that organic journey, I would say, was to look at the rangatahi space and really seek to understand. So if I rewind back a couple of years now, it doesn't seem like a couple of years, but it has been, we started the journey of understanding what our strengths were as a sport for women and girls, but more importantly, where the barriers were. And Wendy, you've mentioned one of the barriers and initiatives there as well that have organically arisen, through finding other ways to play. But so what we did is really looked at speaking to young people, or what were their experiences. It's really easy to go out there and find the strengths and find why people are engaged already, but what about the ones that have dropped off? How do we talk to them? How do we get their voice in it? And that was a big part of the journey and the consultation through the schools and the centres, through online, through going to events and talking to people and just really truly understanding. And those gaps and strengths led to the development of a youth strategy, which has given us as an NSO strategic levers, I would call them, to really drive the how. The how we're still working out. This is quite timely. This is called change in action, because I think we're figuring out the how as we go along. So yeah, 2 years ago, I'd say the gaps were identified, but the trends have been there for a while. So we were keen to change that narrative.
Awesome, thank you. So moving on to the next question that you're all going to answer, and I guess thinking again about the how and the local environment. And so by that, I mean, what was the role of communities in like the specific work that you're talking about today? So when I say communities, I mean, schools or specific people within the community, or clubs, providers, whatever that might be. And who did you identify as the kind of key support people? And maybe even like, how did you then connect up with those people? So we'll start with you, Bailey.
Cool. So I started my lessons out in Kapiti at the beginning of this year. Well, just after COVID actually. And so it was all about using Facebook. So that's how I promoted my sessions and just asked if people wanted to come to these sessions. First of all, we started off at skate parks, and that didn't work very well because there were lots of people there. There were lots of boys there. And it just was still quite intimidating for those girls who were still just learning and wanted a safe space to learn in. So now we do most of our sessions just at schools on courts, and we have all of our own ramps. And so I work in schools as well, so I go into schools during the week and deliver lessons to those girls at those schools, most schools in Kapiti and the 3 high schools there. And so we use those spaces that I've been into to deliver those lessons. The councils played a really big part as well in helping us coordinate with those schools and connecting with other people, and just the local community in terms of the girls and the parents that are bringing their kids along are really important to us, because a lot of the girls that I teach are quite young. So having their parents along, one of the mums brought her camera down, and so now she takes photos for us that we can post on our social medias. It's a very grassroots type of thing, because there are higher levels that you can go into in terms of skating, but yeah, we're just trying to get out there and just encourage some girls to start skating. So bringing in everyone from the community is essential, basically. Yeah, thank you.
Cool. I'm going to ask you a follow-up question, just to go off script a bit. So you just mentioned the social media, but you also mentioned that the parents or the mums might be the ones that are. So do you target your social media at parents, or have you done with this specific initiative in Kapiti, or are you actually targeting sort of the more like young women?
Yeah, so on Facebook, I target the parents, and on Instagram, I target the like teenagers, kids that are coming into it, because there's obviously different demographics on those different social medias. So yeah, I found that useful, doing different things for different platforms.
Cool, and I'm just going to make the assumption that you use different language and different imagery and different emojis.
Of course.
Cool. Over to you, Wendy.
Yeah, so the role of the community and the providers is hugely important in everything that we do with This Is Me. We're a locally led initiative, so it's for the community, by the community. So whenever we start moving into a different space around our region, we're first and foremost connecting with those on the ground. We realise that our communities are very, very different, and that's around the whole country as well. You can't go in with a cookie cutter approach, because that's just not going to work at all. Even side-by-side schools, you can't do that. So it's meeting those people, building those relationships, which is really key. In the case of our walking netball, we had a few key community, just local women that were really wanting to see this opportunity happen. One of those being Claire, who first came across the opportunity. She rallied the troops, I guess you could say, with her connects. And so she was the one that brought the passion, brought the participants, was out there spreading word of mouth around what we were trying to achieve. And then it's through the connects that we have as an initiative, with looking to support and build capability, and then connect with those already in the community that are quite well resourced. So for this example, is with the local indoor sports centre. They were the ones that had the facility, had the time, and had the resource to support this pilot opportunity. So connecting those two partners really early on in the piece and bringing them right throughout the journey was really key in the success, and making sure you've got all those bases covered.
Cool, thank you. Teresa, over to you.
Yeah, it's a good question when you talk about who the support people are. When you talk about rangatahi, they're a complicated age group, as most mothers would say, but they're actually got they've got a lot going on in their life. So when you say support people, I actually think the rangatahi are their own support people first, to hear from them, to support them, for them to support each other. And then a big part of what we're trying to do with the Fast 5 project is to connect our rangatahi to where the decisions are made on their experiences. So we started with a Netball New Zealand Youth Board at the end of last year, and obviously COVID's come in the middle of it, so we've had lots of online connect as this, and putting the rangatahi alongside the people who make the decisions, who are the supporters in their experience, is going to be really key moving forward. And that's a new journey for sport to play. They wanted to make sure that it wasn't just a tick box activity, that they're truly involved. So support people, I've kind of looked at it like building a team, like you're coaching a team of youth together to give them the confidence to step forward in small steps, and the courage, and then to educate our system along the way around what they want and how they can go. So in some ways, if I was to put it really simply, the youth are becoming a bit of an advocate for me, and I'm a bit of a cheerleader for them. So we're kind of supporting each other. And the key decision makers out there are the centres and the zones. We have 83 netball centres, so that's a lot of people around who can enable these young people, as well as a number of schools that are out there as well. So they're amazing support people if you can build an environment where they support each other.
So following on from that, so we'll stay with you. You just kind of talked about the other centres, and I guess that's don't worry, we're not going off script here. I guess that's another element, is yours as a national kind of organisation. So talk to us a little bit more about the comms to the wider netball community. So how did you go about implementing change on a wider scale, through, from the zones through to the clubs through to the schools? So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Fran, and I knew this one was on the script, but actually to communicate across the wider system is a real challenge. So when you want to make change, where do you start? And that was a challenge right at the start, but raising awareness and asking questions and putting youth at the centre of it, and knowing, when I reflected on this question, I looked at it as the Fast 5 project was an opportunity to bring what we are trying to achieve in the youth strategy to life and bring it at a local level. So I looked at it like trying to take your family up climbing a mountain, you know, like climbing your local maunga. I've got Te Mārorongo Kako out here and the Kāwekas out this way, and they don't want to go. It's the school holidays and they don't want to go. So firstly, how do I communicate with them around what we're trying to achieve? The view from the top will be amazing. I know that quality experience for young people is awesome. We all know that, or we wouldn't be here. So how do I communicate that to my family, to get my teenager on the way, to get the younger one, to take, you know, my mum and dad on the journey with me as well. But when you found out, when I landed on, once we developed the strategy and we pulled it together, I realised I was a cheerleader for young people. So how can I provide those opportunities and communicate that message across the system? It starts with raising awareness first. And are we actually truly authentically engaging with young people is the first question to start with. So when we go and climb up that maunga, do we let them have input on which one to climb up on? Do they want to go start in small steps? Do they want to go up the big one? Or actually, we're going to take Nana and Granddad around with us. So we're going to go around the flats from the bottom, and that's our view from the top. But the mission is still the same, but we might just keep climbing up different mountains. So, you know, when we communicated, knowing that clarity first, but also making sure that you spend quite a bit of time listening and connecting and building the relationship. If it means that they want to walk in their red bands, then let them go for it as well. So in the netball world, if they want to play in a pink tutu and red bands and do walking netball, to paint a picture out there that is different from and it's going to get them outside active, they're leading their experience, it might be a whānau approach to it, and that's okay. We can do that. There's now a mandate for that. We've got an opportunity because our mission is still the same. The view from the top of the mountain will still be the same. I can some of the messages, if I can say these on here as well, that the young people are telling us is that through this first year of the Fast Five experience and through the youth board, they want genuine, authentic opportunities to have their voice heard. We've heard lots about youth voice, but how do we bring that to life? So not just a tick box person on their youth board, they actually want a part of the operations as well. They want us adults, and when you, Bailey, you look a bit younger than me, but they want these older ones like myself to move out of the way and leave our ideas out of the door and give them the confidence to contribute and participate. So confidence was a big thing for them. They want us to value all the participants, not just the best players, which means we might need to have different mountains available of what they want to do and different tracks available, and give their ideas a go. It doesn't matter if they fail. They actually just want us to listen and give their ideas a go and not put an adult lens, and truly understand that each one of them are at different stages. And this is one cool message that I got from them was that the adults aren't the experts here. They are. So can us as adults be expert learners? I went, yeah, we're all on this journey together. We all want well-being. We all want the best for our people. But how can we learn together by giving their ideas a go? So kind of the communication has come at it from multiple levels, but the main voice and the main messages are coming from our young people.
Awesome, and so they should. Thank you. So you kind of gave me a nice segue also into mentioning Bailey's age, which Bailey, we're not going to ask you how old you are, but the question that we got for you is, or that we have for you is, you're in a position where you're influencing and engaging with young women, and it's not that long ago that you were a young woman yourself. You may still see yourself as a young woman. How important do you think it is having somebody that is relatable and relevant when you're connecting with young women? And I guess adding to that, so your views on that, but then also what should organisations be looking for if they're recruiting, if they're really interested in this whole like working in the girls and young women's space? What are maybe some key attributes that they might be looking for in the recruitment of new people into the mahi or into their team?
Cool. So first question was, how important is it for me to be a role model for these kids? It's very, very important because I started skating when I was 6, and I stopped skating when I went to high school because I didn't know any other girls that skated, and I didn't have Instagram or YouTube or whatever back then, so I wasn't seeing other girls skating either. So there was no inspiration for me to keep going. And the reason I got back into skating was because I met a girl from my soccer team and she used to skate. So we're like, we should start skating again. So it's having someone there that can be with you while you're doing that, and offer you some support as well, going in back into that space or starting in that space. And so I really value that myself, seeing others in that space and bringing these girls up to be inspirations to others as well. We had a girl that I taught at a school holiday session, and now she's one of our instructors. So that's what we're really trying to push, is be a leader yourself, for others that are coming through. And so for the other question in terms of recruitment, just look for people that are passionate about what they're doing. They might not be the best person in terms of like on a piece of paper, but they're going to be the ones that are going to put the hard work in, and they're going to really give you what you need in terms of whatever you're trying to find in that person. But yeah, just passion is really important.
Awesome, thank you. Wendy, so this kind of is a bit of a follow-on, I guess. We've spoken about like key influences, so it could be the deliverer. In Charissa's case, she was talking about the young people being the key influencer and how important they are. But can you talk to us a little bit about key influences and the journey to support change to happen? So the role of community champions, and specifically, I guess in this, you've mentioned Claire from and her role in the walking netball. So what does this look like? And talk to us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so in our context, we go with the word champion, and just listening to Bailey, then you're 100% a champion in what you're doing. And the points that she made around passion is so important. So in the communities that we've worked with and the journeys that we've been on with these towns, we've sort of found that a community champion can be anyone and everyone. But as long as you do have that real desire and passion to help us achieve what we are trying to achieve. In Claire's case, it was something she wanted to bring an opportunity to her town that wasn't already there. She saw that gap and she wanted to fill it. In other communities, it has been the brave person that shared their story and their journey with physical activity to show that actually there is somebody like you or like me, like your neighbour out there getting active, and that being active comes in all shapes and sizes and forms and different ways. So sharing those stories. I think the key thing is with your community champions, it's not expecting them to give everything. It's just giving them that space, the platform and the support so that they can give what they are able to give. So it might be somebody that's a tech whiz and awesome with social media, liking, sharing, commenting, all the support and encouragement through that platform. It could be somebody, the friendly face at your local gym who's welcoming newbies into the new box fit class every Monday morning or whatever it might be, or the friend that's dragging you out of bed on a Sunday morning to go and try mountain biking or skateboarding or walking netball or whatever it is. They are really everybody, community champions, as long as you do have that passion for making a change and for women and girls to be active their way.
Thank you. So we have got questions from the audience. So now we are going off script, which is cool, right? So Maddie and our trusty Facebook Messenger in the background. So this is for you, Charissa. So you talked about finding the people who have dropped out or who are the non-participants or not involved in netball, and hearing and how important it was hearing their voices to develop your understanding and the impact that that had on developing your strategy. So do you have any advice for others looking to find and engage with their organisation's non-participants?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one that I know our 12 centres, are really challenged by. How do you talk to the ones that aren't playing anymore, and how do you find them? Where do you go? Where do you start? So one centre has decided to work with one school, and they've used their insights from the drop in the numbers of participations to go in there. And the hardest bit is often the schools might give you the ones that are participating already to say, hey, look, we're really keen on a cross section. So being really clear on who you want to talk to when you organise these groups. Teenagers are busy, they don't often turn up sometimes, but maybe bribe them with some food, I've heard works quite well at lunchtime. So and to be able to talk to them in that way, and just really creating a nice relaxed environment where conversation, it's not formal, it can be just a quick chat or little groups, so they might feel comfortable talking in little groups, especially if they're not that confident in physical activity or recreation or sport in any way. So you come at it from a number of other ways, find out what their strengths are, what they really enjoy first, and then let that move sideways into conversations around, well, what is it about netball that you enjoyed? You know, what is it you didn't like? What could we do differently, and get into the solution space? But it might take 2 or 3 times to connect to be able to get there, and that's okay. Take the time with it, but it is a challenge to talk to the ones that aren't participating. It's easy to go to the ones that are already there.
Thank you. I think just the word participation, right, or participants, it's like what is that? You know, non-participants and participants. So you know, it's great when we think about, like, you know, women and girls, like everybody can be a participant. So let's just talk about, you know, going and talking to everybody, as many people as we can. So another question for you all. So we'll start with Wendy. And maybe if you could just touch on a key lesson that you've learnt along your journey, and any changes that you've made to the program, specifically the netball, or like This Is Me, like what's been a lesson and then a change that you've made because of that lesson that you've learnt?
Yeah, so I think the big one probably will relate to quite a few people is that change takes a long time, and it's not going to happen overnight. And it's being okay with the fact that it does take a long time. For us, we've found that the relationship build piece is huge, and bringing people on those journey is really important right from the beginning. That is a big process, and finding those connections, finding the right people, finding your champions. And we know that time is becoming more and more valuable each day. So it's how can we work that into people's lives and go to where they already are. So in the secondary school context, go to school, go to the lunch times. As Teresa said, take food with you. That's a great bribe for teenagers. They love a good bit of kai. So it's meeting them where they are. If you're trying to target mums, it's okay, who's dropping your children at the soccer practice on a Thursday after school? If that's where the mums already are, let's go and chat to them there. I think I've said quite a few times already that bringing people on the journey right from the beginning, and that is really important. If you're listening to them from the get-go and then taking them right the way through, then that sustainable change that you're going to have is going to be far more impactful as you then hand over for the community to really take it and drive with it.
Awesome, thank you. So Bailey, same question to you. So is there a key lesson that either you personally have learnt or something that Onboard Skate has learnt, or that you've talked about before, and that has made adaptations or changes in what you offer or how you do things?
I think the biggest lesson that I've learned just this year doing this is that we need to create safe spaces for these girls to learn in, to feel safe in terms of us as teachers and the spaces that we're taking them to as well. So as I was saying before, the skate parks didn't really work because there's a lot going on. There are a lot of older people there, and it just was really hard for the girls to really put their all into learning something. And so when we took them out of that space and into something that was more just us, that worked a lot better. And I'm finding that as well in high schools, that the girls don't want to do it in spaces where there are a lot of other people as well. So giving them the space that is safe and away from others to be themselves, so that when they do go into a space that is a bit more populated, maybe a skate park, they do feel a bit more comfortable because they've learned in a space that has just been just by themselves, giving them the opportunity to build up their skills and their confidence before they go out and do other things.
Cool, thank you. So we are getting really close to the end of our session that just whizzed by. I'm sure you all feel like that. So it'd be really nice, I think, for us to finish with some impact stories. So actually knowing a little bit about the woman or the young woman or the girls that you've connected with, or one in particular. So Charissa, over to you. If you could tell us an impact story, so share with us a moment or a takeaway that's really made you smile or made your heart sing.
Yeah, I agree with Wendy on being patient as well. But the one story that really makes my heart sing is Georgia Trent, who came off our youth board, is based down in Dunedin, and she was appointed to our Netball New Zealand board in the middle of COVID, which was pretty cool. And for me, it sent a message that as an organisation, we were committed to youth regardless of the environment. Even though COVID came along, there was a genuine commitment there. So, and from there, what's happened, she's been co-presenting with me. I feel a bit of a fraud not having her on here with me, actually. She's been like my co-pilot all the way through with Queensland Netball and Vic Netball and other international organisations going, well, how do we do that? How do we get her on board, and can she give us some advice? And she's now been contracted to deliver the Fast 5 project in Dunedin Netball, and she's in her third year studying, so that's, for me, that's just a win all around. I have to share with you, we're talking about using our pure values around the impact and what we're trying to achieve in the youth space, and everyone knows about Knowles and the Saul Ferns and the pure values. So from a youth perspective, this is what they gave me through this. She said, I'm going to play to win. You know, winning, what does winning look like in our space with engaging young people and getting them more physically active? United, we are ready. How do we connect all the enablers? And one thing Georgia's and we've been talking about is building partnerships cross-code. So she's already started a youth advisory or involved other codes down there and working with the U Girls Cricket worker down there. So again, that's another kind of little win on that. But R is relentless, and we've got to be relentless on our mission and keep at it the whole time. And then when I think of the word E, stands for explosive. So bring the energy. We have to be able to keep the momentum going in this space and not just run a program and then pass it on. So what next for me? What next for Georgia? She's been a win. She's been, in terms of recruitment, Bailey, you kind of mentioned getting the one, well, she's got the passion. And one day, a long time ago in my space, I own the older age group here, someone gave us the opportunity to be a leader or be a part of our experience. So a little bit of a challenge out there around what can we do to provide those opportunities for all the young people as they go through their journey.
Awesome. Yeah, and we're all responsible for that. Bailey, what is impact story? Share with us a moment that's made your heart sing.
So I went to a school a few months ago, and when I first turned up, there was a big sign saying no skateboarding, which I thought was quite funny that they let me come in. So I did about 6 weeks there with 2 different groups of girls. And on my last lesson with the second group of girls, they came up to me and told me that they'd gone to their principal and asked if they could take the skateboarding sign down so that they could skateboard at lunchtimes, and the principal did. So just happy to inspire those girls to make that change at their school.
Super cool, love it. And we're going to give the final word to Wendy, who's not going to share with us an impact story, but is going to give us like one key piece of advice that she wants to leave us with. And I think it actually wraps up a lot of what has been said today as well. So Wendy.
Thanks, Fran. Yeah, so just a wee piece that has been coming through quite a lot around the participant, who is that participant, the non-participant as well. And we talk quite a lot about gathering those insights and hearing the voice of the participant. And I think that is very, very important. But what's even more important is using that information that you are gathering, and that it's not just sitting there on your desk as a pile of statistics. Connecting with those participants, diving that little bit deeper to find out what their story is, what are the barriers that are unique to them, because we know the barriers nationally and even regionally, but when you dive even deeper down into a specific school or a specific town, then there's a whole nother range of barriers there too. So really connect with those people that you are working with and you're trying to bring on the journey, as we keep mentioning a lot today. But Bailey, that is a great impact as well. I just wanted to say that. Very cool.
Okay, and I know that I'm going to be getting ding, ding, dings in the background because we've gone 1 minute over, but I think it's really important that we leave with sharing how people connect with you, or where do they go for more information, either about like your specific mahi, your kaupapa, or you individually. So if we could all just, so Wendy, back to you, if you could all just whip round and share how people connect to learn more if they want to follow up and ask questions.
Yeah, cool. So I think all my contact details will be on the hub somewhere there. If not, Sport Waikato, the website will have all my contact details there. And for our This Is Me initiative, just head on over to our Facebook page, This Is Me NZ, and you'll get up to date with everything that we're doing around the Waikato and on Instagram too.
And wider, because super inspiring. I follow This Is Me and love the journeys and stories of real women and girls doing real stuff. It's awesome. Bailey, what about you?
Fran.
Cool. You can find all of our info about Onboard Skate at onboardskate.com. And my specific stuff is Girls Skate Kapiti on Facebook and Instagram. Easy.
Kia ora. And last but not least, Sharissa, what about you?
I can't sound very good on Instagram. My kids are better, but my contact details, happy to pass them on either via email or a phone call. So youthnz@outlook.com. It's as simple as that. That's what I can share. I'm not sure if it's on our website, so I thought I'd just put it out there, but happy to put them on the content hub as well.
Ngā mihi nui, tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you, wonderful wahine, for joining us and sharing your passion and your stories. There's some really lovely messages coming through in the chat just saying awesome forum. So yeah, really cool. Thank you so much. And the ding, ding, ding is going. So we'll head back over to the main room. Thank you.
Kia ora everyone, and welcome back from your workshop sessions. We trust that you had a very interesting and productive session, and we're looking forward to hearing what actions for change you have discussed. Righto, well, it is time for our sharing session now, and we'll hand over to the three ladies that we have on board. Simone, who's the regional host in Auckland, thank you for joining us. Robin, and to Esther as well.
Thank you, Ricky. And I'm going to kick off because the people that were in my workshop stream were focusing on system change, and we had some incredibly interesting themes that are emerging from our discussion, some of which were referencing some of the themes from yesterday and some which were giving us a little glimpse into our focus on visibility and value tomorrow. But Simone's group in Active were focusing specifically on this area, so we'll hear from her first and then I'll pick up some other themes from my group. Over to you, Simone.
Thank you, Robin. First of all, I'd like to sort of acknowledge that we had a small but very enthusiastic group. As you can imagine, in transitioning to level 1, it has proved challenging. Within that group, though, I was really pleased to acknowledge that we had one male champion. And I think one of the things that really struck a chord with me was his acknowledgement of the position of privilege that he sits in. And his realization, because he had no idea, and that moving forward, you know, he would be, you know, more compelled to advocate for women and girls to have increased opportunities, and was quite embarrassed, to be fair, that there weren't more men in the room. And I think that's really powerful. And if that's one thing that can fall out of today in terms of a change, that's really powerful. We sort of talked a lot about that real authentic buy-in that you need to have from organisations in order to affect change, and looking at yourselves first as well before going out and looking at others. And at the same time, the real need to think about the community that you're working with and listening to their voice, because it's really important that what we do is driven by them, for them. And so those were some of the really key things that came out. I think there was also quite a bit of conversation around the actual social constructs that exist that define our gender, and being more aware of those types of constructs and how they inform the way that we behave in our attitudes. And the opportunity to learn more of that will then create more awareness to be able to see, you know, those moments that we all know exist when we need to have difficult conversations to call out behaviours that aren't okay.
That's a great place to finish them on, because tomorrow in the workshop that we're going to be running on value, we're actually going to be looking at how you call out some of those behaviours and how we enhance the value that people are really demonstrating with respect to girls and women. So thanks for that. Some of the things that came through in our session were the value of networking, and I think even the workshops themselves have created some opportunities for people to connect. I noticed that one person's already made lunch arrangements for somebody else, but that actually building connections and staying connected is one of the objectives of the summit. So it's fantastic to see that those things are happening in a virtual space as well as in a physical environment. I think the networking builds on some of the other themes around partnerships and collaboration, and making sure that you are encouraging and supporting others. I think that the conversation yesterday about pulling people up from behind is really important. I think Joe talked about keeping the ladder down. Thinking about some of those mental models and changing your own and others' narratives around this, challenging the frameworks that are in place, and really an encouragement to work in a collaborative, partnering way to keep pushing for change. So that's what we had in our session. Esther, what about in yours?
Well, some very interesting and useful themes down into, or not down into, but across to delivery. So an important theme here was about listening. Listening to a young woman and taking the time to really understand what a safe space is and what it means. So that can be, you know, girls and women only spaces, but actually maybe just warm up girls only spaces and times. And even in the co-design format, taking the time to communicate what the leaders mean by co-design, so that young people can really fully participate in that process. And I was interested that there was one group, and this kind of feeds into the workshop session tomorrow about value and visibility. They talked for some time about communications, the language of communication, and that, as we heard this morning from Muslim women, young women are diverse as well. So communications that speaks to a range of girls and with regards to in a holistic wellbeing context, not just communicating about those who succeed, those who are sporty, those who are gorgeous, but that we're all different shapes, sizes and abilities. So communicating that. So I thought that was really interesting messages about both how we communicate out and also how we hear communications or are open to communications.
And one of the things that came through in our session was the capacity to have influence over social media. And tomorrow is all about value and visibility, and there's some really great evidence that we're going to be sharing tomorrow. And you will have an opportunity in the workshops to do a little audit of social media channels and to get some insights into how we are really making things available for girls and women and promoting messages that are empowering. So that's it from us. Back to you.
Oh, thank you so much, everyone. I think, like as we said, and I'm sure you've all been, there's a lot of information for people to take in, but the overwhelming thing that Kirsty and I have got sitting here is the positivity and this can-do attitude. Yes, there are a lot of challenges in this space, and particularly this year, but there is a group of people who are obviously here and at this conference over the last couple of days who are working hard and fighting and celebrating their wins and all of those sorts of things, which are so important.
We actually have a live poll that's just come up as well. So we'll ask the question, how buzzed are you right now when it comes to actioning change to increase the participation of women and girls? Highly buzzed.
Highly buzzed.
Yeah.
For sure. Well, look, there's another massive day tomorrow coming up. So we'll say thank you to Simone, Robin and Esther, and wrap up the day as well. And it is the end of what has been another fantastic day, the second day of the Sport New Zealand Women and Girls Summit for 2020. Today we focused on Pillar 2 of the Government Women and Girls in Sport and Active Recreation Strategy, and that was participation. We heard from a range of diverse people and have had some great ideas come forward. Tomorrow, as Robin said, on our final day, we will focus on Pillar 3, value and visibility. And of course, we had a great session and pillar one on day one, which was leadership. I think one thing that keeps standing out for me today was right at the start of the day, Shiloh Curtis, take the game on. I love that attitude and that idea of focusing on what we've got and what we've instead of what we haven't. If you were new with us today, well done for successfully navigating the platform. And for those of you the second day, we really hope that was valuable to you. A huge thank you once again to all our speakers and panelists and contributors that put together this program, especially our workshop facilitators, Esther Buckholt, Lawrence Green and Robin Coburn, and of course all our amazing volunteer programming team who designed such an awesome session.
Yes, and as we do our thank yous, you will notice a screen that has a little survey with just 3 questions. If you would like to answer those, give us any feedback, that will be helpful for tomorrow. Can you fill this in? Yes, of course, before tomorrow, as that pops up straight after this. The annual Sport New Zealand Women and Girls Summit is a Sport New Zealand event delivered in partnership by Women in Sport Aotearoa and the Shift Foundation as well. That's one of the 24 commitments that Sport New Zealand made when the government Women and Girls in Sport and Active Recreation strategy was launched 2 years ago by Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Jacinda Ardern, and the Minister for Sport and Recreation, the Honourable Grant Robertson. It's the second of 3 planned events in the series being staged in the run-up to the 8th IWG World Conference on Women in Sport being held in Auckland and online between the 5th and the 8th of May 2020. Thank you to Sport New Zealand for the support in making this free learning and networking event possible.
Thank you to everyone for attending. We hope you're enjoying the hybrid format. We would love to all be in person, but it's not to be. And so well done to all the groups in the region. It sounds like there's some fantastic events going on, and we really look forward to hearing from those attending the physical events over the next day or so as well. A huge thank you once again to Suzanne McFadden and the team at Locker Room, our official media partners for the summit. And of course, keep an eye out for the next instalment in Suzanne's series covering the summit this year. For those of you who do want to stay on and join the digital networking, it's very easy to join. You just go back out of your timeline and choose the meeting room. You'll be able to get sorted into some networking groups. And I know the few people who did that yesterday really got a lot out of it. And what have we got? 71% are highly buzzed. So surely there's a little bit more discussion to come, maybe over a little wine as well. And if you want to watch anything again, if you want to see one of the workshops that you didn't attend, everything is going to be back on the Summit Digital Hub, or keep an eye on social media as well for the recordings. That will all be posted out later today. The registrations for tomorrow's session will open again at 5 o'clock tonight, and they will close at 10 a.m. tomorrow. So if you have any colleagues that you think you should be with us, particularly those male champions, as Simone said as well, please feel free to invite them along too.
And finishing, we acknowledge Te Atiawa Taranaki of Whanui and Te Whanganui Tara, the Kaitiaki of where Sport New Zealand and the Shift Foundation are located. We also acknowledge the Hokainga and Tamaki Makaurau, and particularly Ngāti Whātua or Ōrākei, as Kaitiaki of where Women in Sport Aotearoa is located and where the national conference is being run from today. We have been your joint MCs for today. But and there's a but.
I will not be here tomorrow. Unfortunately, I had something else already booked, so I won't be here tomorrow, which is such a shame because, you know, value and visibility and a media panel, and I am desperate to have a listen to all of that. But Kirsty will look after you. I'm sure there'll be no problems, and you'll have a great day tomorrow, day 3, value and visibility at 5 to 1 tomorrow. Jump on for that. Have a great day on that one. And thanks so much for having me for the last couple of days as well. So have a great evening. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.